So let me introduce you to our next speaker, Joel, one of the... Hello, Joel.
Hi there.
So let me introduce you quickly. You are developer advocate in
Advocate.
at Red Hat OpenShift. Am I right? So sometimes these developer advocates usually say we are developer avocado. So is that correct? So am I saying something incorrectly?
I'm not sure where that came from, but I guess a lot of people refer to themselves as avocados, but yeah.
Yeah. No, this is just a joke, so of course. But Joel is developer advocate at Red Hat OpenShift, and he has a lot of experience as far as I see, and he's also instructor at Udemy and Eggheads, which is my favorite platform for learning. Also, he's making his own GIF. Joel, is it GIF, GIF,
Oh, it's GIF. Yeah,
JIF, GIF, or what is it at the end?
GIF. Never say GIF.
GIF.
That's the worst thing you could do. Hey, let me show you an example if I can find them. Where is it?
Yes, we are excited to see that.
Oh,
So
I know you
just
are.
share some. But meanwhile, I can tell about your talk. You're going to talk about building CI tools with Node.js, right? So, an very interesting topic, like how we can do that. So, I think we are very, very impatiently waiting for this. Can you just maybe share? It's a bit small. Oh, oh man, that's cool. You have to tell us after your talk, how do you make these GIFs? That's one question for you right after the talk. So, very good. So, I will leave the stage to you and audiences. Good luck.
Thank you, Majid. I'm completely off topic here. Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to my presentation. I'm so excited to be here. I was really looking forward to go to Italy this year. That was my one country that I really wanted to visit this year. I was very excited to be part of this lineup. Turns out, well, I'll stay in my peaches at home, but still very happy to be at this conference. I've heard many good things about it so far, and for over the years, and the lineup so far has been great. So I'm very, very happy to be part of this. Today, I'm going to talk about building CLI tools in Node.js. The reason why I'm talking about this is because I tend to procrastinate a lot when I have a conference to do or a presentation to do at an event. And I was preparing a talk on containers. Most of everything that I do nowadays is related to Kubernetes or containers. And I had this talk that I wanted to do, and it was very a practical, hands-on talk on containers. And there was a lot of back and forth between my command line or my terminal and my slide deck. And that kind of bothered me. I felt like it kind of broke the flow of my presentation. So what I decided to do the night before of the conference, I decided to rewrite my whole slide deck. So I decided, why not? Instead of building one of those regular PowerPoints, why don't I build something in the command line that would let me present from there? So this is kind of what I ended up building. So why don't I just go ahead to my terminal and introduce you to my presentation tool. So there it is. So building CLI tools in Node.js. So let me just move away so that you can actually see this whole screen. So this is what I ended up building. So I have this tool, and I got a lot of questions on how I was presenting my slide deck. So today I'm going to talk about how I actually built the slide deck, or the framework for slide decks that I'm using to present today. So when I was trying to do this, I had a few objectives in mind. I wanted to be able to present and have everything inside of my terminal. I didn't want to switch back and forth between slides and my terminal. And the other thing, I figured, why not give myself an extra challenge and try to use only and exclusively Node.js internal modules, so no external dependencies. So I wanted to build this command line tool. So let me guide you through all the different steps and how I ended up building this tool. So first of all, let me introduce myself. Hi, my name is Joe. I work as a developer advocate, as was already mentioned, for Red Hat OpenShift. So we have a enterprise Kubernetes distribution. It is not the topic of my talk at all. So that's all I'm going to say about it today. If you ever have any questions about OpenShift, though, you can always reach me on Twitter, which is somewhere over there. You'll find it. That's Joel with 2 underscores, Lord. I love Twitter. That's always the best way to reach me. I see that I forgot to change the hashtag of the conference, and I'm so sorry. I feel really bad about that, but yeah, I'm not going to do live changes right now. So, but yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Joel__Lord, and I'm based in Ottawa, Canada. So that's I'm actually on the Quebec side. So if you notice a small French Canadian accent, that's me. I have stickers. I always have stickers with me at conferences. So if you have stickers, well, I'm sorry, you'll have to swim across the ocean and meet me in Ottawa, I guess. Not as useful as it used to be. So I'll be presenting today. I'll be kind of monitoring the chat, but not really. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. If I spot a question and I think that it's worth answering right now, I'll do it. If not, I'll just answer the questions at the end. All right, so let's talk about why you should be building command line tools in Node.js. Well, first of all, for me, it's familiar language and tooling, right? I do everything with JavaScript. I've built many different applications, front ends, back ends, web services, flying drones with bananas and JavaScript. You know, you can do everything with JavaScript. That's great. So I'm familiar with it. I use it all the time. I use it on every one of my IoT devices. I use it on my Raspberry Pis. I use JavaScript everywhere. So I'm very familiar with it. I know all the tooling. I know a bunch of NPM libraries that I can just install and to help me get started with my project. So I'm very, very confident and familiar with Node.js. And Bash is kind of hard, or maybe not hard, but I'm not as familiar with Bash as I should be, probably working for a Linux company. But it's just every time I need to do something, I want to do something, I'd like to loop through the files of a directory to do some operation and automate some process. Well, I have to Google stuff and, copy and paste from Stack Overflow. Not as familiar with Bash as I am with JavaScript. And most importantly, because I can. So why not, right? So I can do it. Why don't I do everything with JavaScript? And this is what we're going to see today. There's a lot of very, very good command line tools that were built with JavaScript. We don't always think of JavaScript as a way to script for the command line, for the terminal, but there's a lot of very good examples, some of them that you've probably already used. Create React app. If you are a React developer, you've definitely used that tool. And that was entirely built in JavaScript. If you use Angular, there's also the Angular CLI as well as the Vue CLI that are also built with JavaScript as far as I know. But those are tools that you already use that are already built with JavaScript. Of course, CLI slides, because you will definitely want to make a presentation in your terminal next time you have to do a presentation. So you can actually find the source code of this project out there, CLI-slides.com as well, because of course I had to buy a domain name for that. So you can find all the information there. Liran Tal was one of the presenters earlier today. He built a tool, Dockly, an amazing tool to manage your Docker containers inside of your terminal. And that was all built in Node.js. A great example of a good tool that you can use. And Rui Adorno also built a very interesting tool called ipipe2, which lets you pipe information from standard in to standard out and process different things. So it's a very, very useful tool that you can use as part of your Bash scripting, but it's all written in Node.js. So very, very good tool by Rui from NPM. All right, so you want to write your first command line tool, but where do you get started, right? That's always the first question. So where should you get started? Well, the first thing you'll probably want to do is to provide some outputs, right? You'll want to give some sort of information to your users. That's why you're actually building a tool. So why don't we start with doing some outputs? Well, first of all, you can still use console log. So you're probably already familiar with console log. You've probably used it for debugging a few times, although it's not the best solution. But you've probably used console log already. So you can still use that when you write your applications in Node.js and command line tools in Node.js. But process.standardout is probably the way that you'll want to go. Now, it's a little bit more powerful. In fact, console log uses process.standardout behind the scenes. So by using a process standard out directly, you'll be able to do things like move your cursor around, use colors, clear the screen, remove a line, do a lot of different things. So I've used this a lot in this presentation or in this slide deck. So you can see that the title is lined up at the top, and then I've got the name of the company at the bottom also lined up, and everything is kind of lined up. And even I can even go and just resize my screen, and you can see that I actually made it responsive because, once again, I can. And because we should always build our applications as being responsive. But that is also done through the process standard out. So you can use console log. Console log works great, but it creates a new line every time. So that's one thing that you'll have to keep in mind. But it's very easy to use. You're already familiar with that. So you can do console log hello world. Just a quick caveat, if you use emojis, and that is very popular nowadays, so every line that you output to the console will start with an emoji, giving some sort of idea to the user of what is happening. So, a stop sign if there's an error or different things like that. If you do use something like that, make sure that you put 2 spaces after your emoji. It has something to do with the Unicode characters using 2 byte codes. Something but just if you don't do it on some console, it will actually overlap with your first text. So make sure that you always do that. But yeah, apart from that, that's very acceptable, very easy way to kind of provide your user with some updates on the status. But what I've used personally was process standardout.write. It starts with the current cursor position, so that can be very useful if you start manipulating things. If you start putting things on the screen at different places, then it can be very, very useful. So outputting to your terminal is very easy. And yes, I've built a terminal inside my slide deck, which runs inside the terminal because I can. So thank you, JavaScript. So this is my terminal inside my terminal. So I can actually run those different scripts. Let's use console log first. Oops, what is it called? Scripts. ls scripts. ls script. What is it? Samples. There you go. All right. Node samples console. All right. So I can run this script, which will just give you 2 console logs. So hello world, and here's the second line. What does the script look like? Samples/console. Samples/console.js. All right, so this is our script. So console log. So nothing fancy here, and it just outputs the 2 lines as you would expect. Now, if you use standard out, let's actually take a look at the code, stdouts.js. So the code is exactly the same, but it uses process standard out write. And if we execute that, sample/stdout, there you go. So you've got the output once again, so nothing fancy, but you will notice that it actually appended the second line. So it started writing where the cursor was positioned. So by using that, you can actually move your cursor around, manipulate it, so you can center some text, for example, so you can know the number of columns that you have, and then based on that, you can actually move your cursor to where you want it to start outputting from there. So that's something that you would not be able to do with console log. Good. There's also an example, and I'll actually need to open up a new window just to show you this one. So once you know that you can actually manipulate your cursor and do different things, you can start doing things like having someone that fakes type, or a script that fakes type. So hello, this is someone typing. No, it's not. It's actually a script running. So because I can now use process.standardout.write, I can use set timeouts. I can randomly put some some backspaces and randomly put in some typos, just like what happened right there. So you can do a lot of different things by using standard out. All right, with standard out, you can also use colors. Colors can be nice. You have my title here in color, and so on. So in order to use those, you will need to access ASCII codes. So that backslash x1b square bracket some number m is actually a code color that you can use. 0m resets to the original terminal defaults. 31, I believe, is red. So this actually should output some text in red. Yeah, 31M outputs in red. So this is exactly the output you would get. 7M would reverse the colors. So in my terminal, I currently have a white on black default palette. And if you had a black on white, then it would actually reverse to anyways. So it would just reverse the colors, right? You can change the background color as well. So by using codes in the 40s, you can actually switch the backgrounds. In this case, I'm switching to yellow and just reset to the terminal defaults with 0M. So colors, we can just run a small script. Colors, I've probably used the American notation here. Colors, there you go. So you can just change the colors. Yeah, and you can change background. Let's take a look at the code, colors.js. So it's simply using those codes. Now, this is nice, but what I've done, because I have to use a lot of colors inside this this application, what I've decided to do, just to make it a little bit easier, if I can find my JSON script, what I did is to just do a replace line. So I have a function that will actually write to the code, and it will just replace words in square brackets, so square bracket greens and square bracket reset with the actual color codes, just so that it's a little bit more easy to read for myself. All right, so to move your cursor around, very useful as well. X1b, you pass it the column semicolon row. So to move your cursor to the position that you want. You can also move up a number of rows. So if you know exactly at what position you're at, you can actually move it around. You can move up, down, left, or right using those various codes as well. You can also clear the screen, so that can be useful if you just need to, well, if you want to display a new slide, for example. In this case, what I do is that each time I hit the left or right arrow, I just clear the screen and rewrite this slide that is supposed to be there. Right. So we've talked about outputs. You're now able to provide some output. Nothing fancy there, probably stuff that you are already somewhat familiar with, at least the console part. But you see that you can actually do a little bit more and vary a little bit, and you can be a little bit more fancy with how you display outputs to the screen. So that's nice. You now have some inputs, but you'll probably want to have some inputs at some point. You'll probably want to ask the user something just to be able to act on that. I recently wrote a quick script just to help me to upgrade my my OpenShift clusters from 4.2 to 4.4. And I just, in order to make that script reusable, I just asked the user, what version do you want to upgrade to? And then I'll just do the whole process. So it's nice to be able to ask some inputs. To read the user input, you can use standard in directly, but that's a little bit tricky. It uses streams and a lot of different things. Your best friend is probably the readline module, which is also part of the core Node.js. So you can ask the user for just free type input. The first thing that you'll want to do is to require readline. And then you will have readline. You'll create an interface with that. You will specify what is the input and the output of your interface. So in this case, I'm just going to use the process standard in and standard out. And by using readline, you can use the question method. Just ask a question, and then you'll have a callback where you can process the answer. In this case, I'm just going to say hello to the answer that was provided. You can also bind a readline to a standard in process to trigger a key press event. That is what I use for this slide deck. Very, very useful. So what you can do is to create an interface once again. And in this case, I only need an input. I don't need an output because I don't want to echo the keys that are typed in. I just want to basically trap them. And I can say emit a key press event on process.standardin. And then I have my process standard in on key press. and I have my callback. So what I do here with this slide deck is that whenever I detect the name right, I move on to the next slide. And if I detect previous, or if I detect left, I move on to the previous slide. So I'm able to do an event on the key press and move between my different slides here. Good. So what does the question script look like? Let me just go back here, sample/question. And here we go. So, hey there, what's your name? My name is Joel. Hello, Joel. And if I change it to world, hello, world. All right. So we're actually able to process that information. And the code is, once again, relatively simple. So you can see it's pretty much the code that I've just sampled before. So this is how you can get some inputs. One thing that I also wanted to just touch on very quickly is to try to use bash standards when you're building your applications. At some point, you'll want to, for example, stop your application. And you'll want to be able to use the standard in and standard out so that your application content can actually be piped in into another application if needed. So use bash standards whenever you can. If you have to exit, that is one of the use cases as well. Use process.exit and provide an error code if needed. That is very important to make sure that your users are able to catch if there's an error. If they want to script your script, if they want to make a script that would use your script, they'll have to be able to catch those error codes. And I could actually just go here, sample/exit code. Operation was completed successfully, so it actually exited with a code 0. And if I do it again, it should randomly quit at some point. That's not very useful because you don't see if it was successfully, really if it was completed successfully or not. Let me just show you the sample here. So this is what happens when I try to run the script. It just gets a random number, so 0 or 1. And then if it's a 0, it was completed successfully, and I just process.exit using 0. And if there was an error, I'll just process.exit using that random number code. Now, in my terminal here, what I did is that I always return a check mark right here in my prompt when the preceding operation was successful. And if I try something like ls, that was a success. If I try la is also a success. But if I try this, then you can see that, oh, there's an error that happened. Command not found is error code 127 in bash. So you can see that it returned a big red X. So immediately when I use some of those command lines tools, I know if the operation was successful or not based on my prompt. So if I run this sample, exit code. So now it was successful, and I can see it immediately. If I try it again, also successful. And there we go. So we finally got an error. So I can see it immediately in my prompt. So I can either, if I'm scripting, I can actually continue acting on based on the fact that I know there's an error, or in this case, I could just trap the error, or I can see it in my prompt. So that can be very useful as well. So try to follow those bash standards whenever you can. All right, so now you're probably wondering why how I did my terminal inside the terminal, and that was running shell commands. So in order to run shell commands inside of or from your Node.js script, you can use exec. So this will let you run a command and parse the response. It is very easy to use. The only issue is that the callback only gets issued once only gets triggered once the command is processed. So I'll show you a quick example on that. You could also use child process.spawn, but then you have to use the output from a stream. So you have to kind of always listen in. So it's a little bit trickier to use. It's definitely one of the things that I want to do as part of my project here, but I didn't get to it yet. There's also some libraries like Nodepty that are there to make your life a lot easier. This is definitely what I should use instead of trying to reinvent the wheel here. But there's definitely different things. Also, if you're going to use exec, then watch out for injections, right? You don't want a user to delete your whole file system. So let's see, terminal, node samples terminal. So right here, I have a terminal running inside my terminal, but you don't really see it, but it's I'm going way deep in my inception levels here. Let's clear the screen. Node samples terminal. So basically, I have a terminal here, and I can just output the result from the latest command. I can exit this terminal. Let me just show you the code. And once again, terminal. So you can see that I've used a child process, and I just pipe in whatever content that I get back from my command into the terminal with the result from the latest command first. So basically, this is how I created a terminal inside my terminal. The only difference is that I managed to fit it inside a screen here. So this is kind of how you can do that. You can run commands using exec. When you're using exec, what I mentioned is that the callback only gets triggered once the command is processed, and that is very important. So if I try to run this sample, the one that kind of mimicked someone typing earlier, if I try to run it here, because I'm using exec, you will see what happens. I start the command and nothing seems to happen. So let's just wait a few seconds, and there you have it. So you can see that it actually waited for the command to be fully processed, and then it gave me the output of it. And that was the final output that I then displayed on the screen. So using child process spawn, you can actually use a stream and display the information in real time as it comes from the command. But if you use exec, you only get the final output. So those are the two main differences between those. Also, beware a smartass that would come on your computer and do something like rm-rf /. You don't want that to happen, of course. So just make sure that you block those at any time, all right? There's actually a story behind that. Let's see if I can just quickly open this link. I did a presentation not so long ago, and my friend Ben DeCray went behind me as I was answering questions, and you might be able to see what happened right here. So, you know, he just went on my computer and was just making fun of me. So make sure that you always you beware those injections. So block those. Make sure nobody fools around with your computer. Or if you're actually doing that on your server, you don't want someone to run that command because it will crash your server. Okay, another thing that you'll probably want to do is processing arguments. Processing arguments, you can get all the arguments that were passed to the command line by using process.argv. Processing those arguments is a whole different game, though. You might want to use a library to help you with that because it can get really, really dirty. So console log process.argv will output all of the arguments, starting with the executable, followed by the JavaScript script that is being executed, and then the other arguments that were passed to it. So I can actually run this sample / arguments. And you can see that I have my executable followed by the JavaScript script. If I provide it with some arguments, let's provide an output, which will be output.json, and then -- version, and then what else could I say? -- name equals Joel. You can see that everything is just outputted one after the other, and it's very tricky. So what was the value passed for the -o argument? It gets really hard to kind of figure out. So process.argv works really well when you have only one argument that you're expecting. So in the CLI slides example, I just started with the name of the JSON file that contains all of the slide data. So, you know, and then I just parse that file. So that's very easy. There's no real argument parsing that I need to do. But if you have multiple arguments and so on, it can get really tricky. So what I did was I took a stab at writing a quick script that would parse those arguments. And let's just try also -o output.json, -- version, -- name Joel. And you can see that it provides me with, okay, well, O is output.json, - version is true, - name is Joel. It kind of somewhat works, but not fully. And let me just show you the actual code to be able to do that process. There it is. And we'll just make this slightly bigger. So you can see that it took me all of this. It took me like 32 lines to be able to only parse the arguments, and it does a very poor job at it. So parsing those can be very tricky, so you'll probably want to use a library to help you here. All right, so you can now output to your users, get some input from your users. You can now process arguments. You now know how to use exit codes. One of the things that I use JavaScript CLI tools and different things is to manipulate my file system, just to automate different things. So this can be very, very useful. So using FS, which is a core library, you can interact with your file system. So any sort of file manipulation, including file watching, can be done through this module. So if you need to read from a file, you can start by requiring FS, then you read file, give it the file name, and then you have a callback that will be executed once the file has been read. So you can just output this. It will actually give you a buffer, so you will need to convert that into a string in order to manipulate that if you want to manipulate it as a string. So if you want to write to a file, very similar. So require the FS module, write file, give it the name of the file, what you want to write, and then there's a callback that will be called once it was written to the file. So that works well. There is one thing that you need to keep in mind, though, is that those operations are asynchronous. So if you would use a write file followed by a read file, there is a good chance that the write file will not have been completed before you actually run the read file. So there is a way to call those functions synchronously. You can use write file sync followed by read file sync. And this will actually block the script until the operation is completed. This is what I use in my slide deck, for example, because I want to process and take all of that information from the JSON file to have all the information from the slides before I can actually start drawing those slides. So I use sync in order to avoid a race condition. And in my case, I know that it's gonna take fractions of milliseconds, so it doesn't really matter if I do it as a synchronous operation. But if you have a web server, then you'll probably want to be careful about using synchronous functions. If you want to promisify this whole thing, you can use, and because they're only using callbacks, but if you want to promisify this, you can return a new promise based on how it's done, but it gets a little bit trickier, and it's a little bit of overhead. But once you have that, you can actually read file promisify, then and then process the data. So you have something that looks a little bit familiar, looks a little bit more like the fetch function. So another very cool thing is how you can watch files. And that was not a surprise for me just because I've seen it so many times, right? I've been using NodeMon, and I've been building a React application and using all the tooling that come with it. So I know that the file system can watch the files, and whenever a change happens, it will just perform something like recompile my code or whatever it is that it does behind the scenes. But what I was surprised to learn is how actually easy it is to do that. And where's my VS Code right here? So, and I've told you at the beginning, I've noticed that I have the wrong, this won't work actually. Yeah, it should work. I have the wrong hashtag here. So let's try to change this for, wow, I have completely the wrong conference. So I'll change those dates here. I'll also change this to jsday Verona. It's also on the internet, and hashtag jsday. All right. So now this is fixed. And if I go just to have something that is displayed on the screen as well, around here somewhere. Okay, I have the code to watch a file. So you can see constant fs. Keep an eye on that const right here. We're going to change that to be yellow instead. And let's just wait a few seconds, and there it is. So you have it now. So you can see that it changed the color. So it was able to watch that file and immediately change the color of this. So if I change it back to blue, you should see it change to blue in just a few seconds. There you go. I noticed that it's not reloading the whole thing, so I'll have to fix that in a future version of CLI slides. Node CLI, and let's open. Oh, I actually have two arguments here because I can actually open on a specific slide. So there you go. So I've changed this hashtag. So live fixes to my presentation. Different things that you can do is also you can write to a file by using those. So node samples write file. And what I'll do here is that, okay, argument missing. So you can see how I parsed the arguments here, and I've noticed that there was an argument missing. So I've returned error code 1. So immediately I see that something went wrong. I also use an emoji to tell my users. So I'll just write world as being the argument. Successfully wrote to file. So now I can use my sample read file, and I can see that it's calling hello world. If I was to use, write Joel, and read file again. So we have hello Joel. So we're just writing to file and reading to file. I've used the promisified format right here. So there's a lot of things. All of those code samples will be shared at the end, so you can actually play with them later on. All right, so good. So now you have your application. You've got outputs, inputs, you've got arguments, you've got file system manipulation, you've got pretty much everything that you want. Now comes the time to package everything and publish it, because you want the whole world to be able to have access to your awesome tools. So how do you make sure that your users can actually download it? Well, you can actually use Npm for that. So you can use Npm, just your favorite package library manager. The only thing that you'll need to do is slight changes to your JS file and your package.json file. So first of all, you will need to add a shebang character sequence to your .js file. So you will start by specifying that this file, if it's an executable, will be executed by a node. So you need to specify that. And then you can change the permissions on your file if you're using an X operating system. So chmod plus X, give it the name of your JS file, and now you can just run your CLI.js file, and it will automatically be executed. The other thing that you should do to your package.json file is to add a bin parameter. So this tells NPM that when this package is downloaded from NPM, create a symbolic link that will be called CLI slides in this case, and that will map to my file presenter.js. So my file presenter.js is a JS file that is executable. So I have this shebang character at the beginning. And NPM will actually create that symbolic link or that shortcut in Windows from CLI slides inside your path somewhere to this JavaScript file inside this node modules folder. So now whenever I use CLI slides, it will actually just open up this JavaScript script. When you're developing the tool, of course, you're not going to use npm install because you're actually developing the tool on your own machine. So you can use npm link, which will take care of creating that symbolic link behind the scenes. npm publish, when you're ready, you need to do npm login first, log into your npm account, npm publish, and it's now on npm. It's available for the rest of the world to be able to use it. So that's all you need. So by using those simple APIs, you can build very powerful CLI applications. This whole presentation deck is built with no dependencies whatsoever. So it's all using Node.js core, the core Node.js libraries. So if you want to take a look, all the code is available on GitHub. Feel free to take a look, cli-slides.com. There's a few tools and libraries that you should probably use, though. I think I've went on a stretch, and I really wanted to have just the core Node.js and no dependencies, but that was just an objective on my own. Really, if you're building CLI tools and you need to build them, seriously for your day-to-day job, then you'll probably want to use some libraries to help you. Oak Cliff is the open command line interface framework by Heroku. It's available on npm, so you can use it with npx. And it helps you it's kind of the Create React app for command line tools. It creates either single commands or multi-commands. So if you have something like, I'm thinking kubectl right now for manipulating Kubernetes clusters. Kubectl has a bunch of multiple commands. So you have kubectl logs, and then you specify an argument. And kubectl apply, and then an argument to apply different things on your cluster. So there's like kind of multi-commands inside of a command, and each one of them is in their own file. So it makes it a lot easier to create those large, complex tools, or you can just create simple single commands as well with that framework. What's really nice about it is that it includes all the scaffolding that you need, linting, packaging, testing, everything that is needed. It will just create a whole thing for you, and you're ready to go and to build your command line tools. Yargs, very, very useful. I've told you already, arguments processing is hard, and Yargs really, really makes it easy to process all of those arguments. It handles shorts and long versions. So if I would pass it -o something, then it would be able to detect that and provide that inside of a JSON object. or a long -- version, whether they have a parameter or not. So it provides you with a lot of different things. It handles flags and arguments. So very useful tool. Chalk, also very useful tool that you can use to colorize your text. So instead of using the ASCII codes or ANSI codes, it can help you do everything that I've shown you with the process.standardout. You can move the cursor around. You can do all of those things. I thought that the syntax was a little bit awkward, so I prefer to, in my case, I just prefer to use those square brackets and just the name of the color, and then whenever I have to write, instead of writing directly with process.standardout.write, I just have a write function that will do a regular expression match and just replace those codes that I've added by the actual ANSI codes. Nodepty is definitely a tool that I want to integrate in CLI slides in the future. So it basically emulates a terminal. It would be very useful for my terminal to be able to manipulate that stream and provide the output and tell it that, okay, well, this is a terminal that has this number of rows and columns. So I can really create a fake terminal inside my CLI tool. It is the tool that is used in Xterm if you're used to that, or also in VS Code. So in the VS Code right here, in the bash part at the end, this is actually using Nodepty behind the scenes. So you can set the height and width of your pseudo terminal, and there's a lot of different things that you can do. So definitely look into that if you want to build pseudo terminals. So in summary, to display anything, standard out, capture user input, standard in, process arguments, really hard, but you can use it. File system through FS and use NPM to manipulate. And there's a lot of different tools that could use to make your life easier. I'll leave you with a few links. So the official Node.js documentation, very, very useful. There's a lot of information, a lot of things that you probably didn't know about Node.js there. Creating Node CLI packages and escape codes in the terminal. Thank you very much for being here. You can find all the links at easyurl2/CLI. That's all I had. Thank you.
Well, sorry. Oops, Majid. Sorry, you are mute. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
I'm sorry for that. That happens when we have an online conference and a lot of screens open, you know? So, thank you very much, Joel, for such an amazing talk, and it was so informative. We don't have much time,
Go
but
ahead.
I'll have two questions. So, yeah, it's good that we actually check these two questions before you go. The first one comes from our audiences, and it says that, do you have any idea of a small personal utility CLI tools to build on your own, just to make sure that you get your hand dirty with these
There's
CLI?
so many that you can use. Pretty much every time that I need to script something, I'll use one. I don't know if I have it installed here. I even built a biorhythm. That was a fun one. It's not installed on this machine. But there's various different tools that you can use. There we go. It's right here. This was a fun one. So biorhythm, if you're familiar with that, that's something from the 90s, I guess. There you go. So you have like a biorhythm which displays. So that's a fun challenge that you could potentially use for just getting started with those.
Very good. Thank you very much, Joel. So I bet that audiences will follow you on Twitter or any social media that you are, and
Yes.
they can ask you any question later. I'm sure you're open for that.
Of course
so
I
thank
am.
you very much, and see you next time, maybe in Verona in person.
I hope so. See you next year.
See you.